From allergies to zinc deficiencies, hangry to hay fever, we provide easy-to-absorb information to improve your health. It sounds like health on Texas A&M Health Talk. Welcome to Sounds Like Health. This is Mary Lee Meyer.
I'm our co-host, Sam Kraft.
And we are here with Dr. Gabriel Neal. He's here with us from the Texas A&M College of Medicine. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. So we are going to be talking about superficial injuries, kind of
like paper cuts, small burns, like, I burned my hand on the coffee cup, like that kind of stuff.
Just like those baby little injuries that bother us so much.
Paper cuts.
And so we're calling you Gabe now?
That's right. You call me Gabe.
That's what I hesitated
Dr.
on.
Gabe or just
Doctor?
Just Gabe.
Outside of the exam room, I would prefer to be just Gabe.
So we're here with Gabe, and he has become quite the expert on paper cuts.
You write one article on something, and you're the expert.
So why do paper cuts like that hurt so badly? Why is it just a catastrophe when you go in?
I think there are a number of reasons why paper cuts are the catastrophe that we think of them as. And the first is that they're usually unexpected, right? Like no one intentionally goes and gives himself a paper cut.
Well, you're just folding a letter and all of a sudden slice. Right. It's like, oh, my hands, I just cut my finger off.
Yeah, we're doing something really easy and something that we've mastered. Licking an envelope, folding a piece of paper. And it's usually something kind of even personal, like we're writing that letter to a family member, thanking them for that cool thing they did for us. And we're happy. And then boom, right?
Now,
the paper cut happens.
You blood stamped it now.
That's right. It's definitely more personal when your blood is on the envelope. At least I think so.
Yeah.
But maybe off-putting to, Aunt Sally. True. We're having a good moment, and then a paper cut happens. And there's this immediate recognition of injury. And we're kind of pleading with ourselves for a moment to think, maybe this didn't happen. But it did, and it hurts. And then throughout the day, of course, it continues because these paper cuts happen on an area of our body that's usually in use a lot, like our lips, our fingers. And so we're constantly reminded of this injury for the next day or two while it's healing. And even though it's this small injury that can easily reapproximate and heal because of where it's at, it's going to reopen because it's an active part of our body. And then there's kind of this shame. There's this psychological aspect of the fact that I was doing something easy and that I know how to do, that I've really mastered. And yet, while I'm doing that, I injured myself. And so there's a variety of emotions that I think we experience. We get angry at ourselves for doing it, and we're kind of shamed. Like, who wants to complain to their colleagues? Guess what I just did? You'd love to commiserate a little with somebody, but you don't really want to admit, I cut myself accidentally folding a piece of paper. And so there's kind of maybe even a shame aspect that we don't like about it. Makes it worse. I think shame makes anything worse. And then, and then there's this fear, anxiety perhaps, that am I going to do this again? Like later today when I'm folding that next stack of envelopes? So all of that together makes paper cuts, I think, kind of fun to talk about and a little bit unique.
I've never thought about that in depth of a paper cut before, of like it shaming myself into a wound. Like I've just never thought that in depth about, just cut, it's a little cut. But when you say all that you just did, it really kind of comes back to you, and it's like, how could you do that? What?
Yeah, well, compare it to an injury that you can't wait to tell your family about, right? Or your friends or your work injuries, right? You're driving your car and like a deer runs into you and you smack your head. That's a good story. Everyone's going to be like, we're so happy you're still alive and you're so tough. A paper cut, everyone's going to be like, suck it up, get to work. We don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, I feel like when I get a paper cut, even I'm like, okay, I'm being a baby. It doesn't hurt that badly.
It stings though, really bad. Like it's the littlest thing.
And so why does it hurt that badly?
Right. So the sort of historical answer to this was, well, there's a lot more nerves in your finger, in your lips, or wherever these happen. And so they hurt more. And as I dug into this and looked at articles going back into like the 50s with punch biopsies and putting slides of skin under a microscope and counting the number of pain fibers in the skin at different points of the body, you do see that the body's ability to tell how close one point is to another on the body does get better as we get out to our fingers and toes. And so there is excellent discrimination of pain and heat and cold and injury in our fingers and hands and feet and lips. And that's all true, but that's not really the whole story. The reality is that the brain also commits a lot more real estate to interpreting what it's getting from the periphery as well. And I think that's the cool scientific side of this, is that we all know that we can discriminate better at our fingertips. But what we may not realize is that there's a whole lot of hardware and RAM and brain power built into deciphering and putting that pain on display and analyzing it in our mind. And I think that's the real amplification, is just our brain treats the pain that's coming from those parts of our body with a lot more high definition than it does from other parts. And it's not just because of the number of nerve fibers. So that's the fun part, is it actually is in the mind that this amplification is occurring. And it's very, very high definition.
That's interesting. I never knew your brain would delegate more pain to certain parts of your body than other parts of your body.
Right. And so that was the fun part of what I've written about, is that there's more to the story than just the number of nerve fibers.
And that's
it's the brain part.
Yeah, and that's probably why, sometimes I'll wake up the next morning with a bruise and I have no idea where it came from, but I would know immediately when I get a paper cut.
Right. And I think it's worth pointing out that there's a lot of different types of nerve fibers, and we don't have to go into that because it's not that exciting, but there are different pain fibers for sensing temperature and pressure and even different kinds of pain. And so there's that first instant feeling of pain, and that's one type of nerve fiber. But then there's other types of nerve fibers that don't fire quite as soon. It takes them less than immediately to fire, but they fire longer, and they're kind of responsible for that throbbing achiness that we get with those paper cuts for hours and hours after they occur.
They're so awful.
Yeah.
So this might be a silly question, but when do you need to do anything about a paper cut? If it's bleeding, I need to reach for my antibiotic ointment? Do I need to call my doctor?
Do you find a super glue to glue it back together?
Yeah, is my world ending if I get this paper cut?
Yeah, I dare you to call your doctor's office and say, I need to see my doctor about this paper cut I have. Just see what the response is. Most paper cuts do not require a health professional. I think patients who are on blood thinners, which is a lot more common now, might have a paper cut that bleeds significantly. I still don't think they necessarily have to see a doctor, but obviously those kind of patients might take that question a little more seriously, especially if the bleeding doesn't stop quickly. So most paper cuts are superficial enough to where if they bleed at all, they will quickly stop under normal circumstances. And I think that putting a bandage on it makes a lot of sense if it's bleeding. It also offers some protection from kind of re-injury. If you bump that part of your finger again with the paper cut, it's going to hurt, and that bandage can just cushion it. And that can speed up the healing process. So I would say feel free, put a bandage on it. Antibiotic ointment's never a bad idea. I would also think that most paper cuts wouldn't require that. My big advice for any wound, though, is keep it clean and keep it dry, right? And so if you get a paper cut, wash your hands. That's going to help get any of those bacteria, those bad bacteria that live on our skin. We have good bacteria too, just for the record, but the bad bacteria, like we've heard about Streptococcus and Staphylococcus, that they can get into a wound, even a superficial one. And if you have diabetes or some other disease that puts your immune system in a little bit compromised state, then it's really imperative that you wash that part of the body that has the injury. So wash it with soap and water and keep it dry. And that really wards away nearly any development of infection that might occur with a paper cut or some superficial cut injury. But if you do get a paper cut and you notice that over the course of the day or the next day that the redness is getting worse, right? If there's surrounding redness, like progressively worsening pain, that would worry me that there is developing a skin infection at that point. There's more than just a cut then. The bacteria has found a foothold and it could cause problems. In that case, I think calling your doctor makes a lot of sense.
That's crazy how something so small can
losing your finger or your hand. When you get staph in it, I mean, it's very possible. It's terrifying.
So what's another type of superficial injury? Maybe like a sunburn?
Oh, no, rug burn. This is rug burn.
Ooh, those are painful.
Rug burn. Rug burn, surface burn.
Right on. Well, I think, thankfully, we don't see the carpet basketball and volleyball courts that I saw when I was in high school back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, real AstroTurf.
I can remember a lot of horrible rug burns playing in these high school gyms that had carpet flooring. And I'm relieved, frankly, that those don't exist really anymore.
Terrible.
I don't think I realized gyms had carpet.
It was a real
flooring.
thing. It was a real thing. And when you dove for a ball, you just knew this. I'm going to regret this.
It was like the floor literally is lava, like the old game you played when you were a kid. That's literally what it was.
Because even on the like the hardwood basketball courts, you can still
There's a little bit of give, but you can still get bruised up or burned, wood burned,
lose some skin.
Yeah,
there was nothing like a carpet gymnasium to just
and I bet
skin
that
you
just
alive.
held infections and held.
Yeah, it's a terrible idea. I don't know how it caught on. I wasn't there when that happened, but I just suffered from that legacy decision. Yeah. So carpet burns are similar in depth to a paper cut, and so they're very similar. The downside to a rug burn or any kind of traction, friction-based injury to the skin is that it's gonna expose a lot greater surface area of our deeper skin tissue than a paper cut is. And so those are far more ripe for infection than I think a paper cut is. The good news on them, though, is that they're exposed to the air. You're not injuring the tissue and then having it recovered by another layer of tissue. And so that, in a sense, protects it in a lot of ways from infection. It's very easy to keep a rug burn clean and dry. Same trick. You wash it, you dry it. And I think with those kind of wounds, using a antibiotic ointment, at least for the first day or two, makes a lot of sense. And covering it with a bandage to keep your clothes clean, number one, but number two, to protect it from getting dirty again, makes a lot of sense. So on rug burns, they're going to hurt for all the same reasons that we just talked about with paper cuts, but the care of a rug burn usually is a little more because they're just bigger and there's a larger surface area involved.
They're always more tender too, I feel like, because there's a bigger area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're normally on a knee or some part of the body
Yes.
that you bend. So how do you take care of them if it takes longer than a few days? Sometimes they can feel like they can last for forever.
I literally nursed a knee scrape for like 2 months during a soccer season back in 2017. And I would re-scrape it during every weekly soccer game. And so I would come home and my kids would comment, "Dad, your knee's bleeding again." I was like, "Yep, it's bleeding again."
This is parenthood.
This is part of playing soccer. So it didn't heal until the end of the season. But I kept it clean and dry. I covered it with a bandage and kept it covered, like I said, and gave it the time that it needed to heal. You can't really speed that up.
So let's talk about a different kind of burn. How about sunburns? I feel like I'm always a little bit pink. Surprisingly,
You're pretty fair skinned. I mean,
yeah,
I bet you burn pretty well.
could be walking to my car and I'll come back.
Walking to
pink.
your
You burn under the full moon.
I do. You're joking, but
It could happen if you're out there long enough.
So what do we do about that?
Well, first avoid it. That's the main thing. They're a little more dangerous than a typical other burn because what's really happening with a sunburn is you've got ultraviolet light coming from the sun that is damaging the bonds of our DNA. And that disruption of these AT and GNC bonds in our DNA result in miscodes and ultimately lead to skin cancer over time. And so, particularly before the age of 24, we know that sunburns really put people at risk for skin cancer later in life. So I'm a big advocate for making sure that kids get sunblock on because that's really protecting them. Of course, as an adult, we still need to protect ourselves from that. I'm not saying that you don't need sunblock when you're 27.
That's a good point. When you say 24, why is 24 the age? Because I feel like you're always in the sun. So is it just as you get older, your sun gets more conditioned to this?
No, it's a matter of these skin cells replicating over and over and over again. And when you get that DNA damage early in life, there's enough time for those mistakes and miscodes in the DNA to get replicated often enough to where you end up with a cell that doesn't know how to die. And when a cell doesn't know how to die, which is genetically coded into it, it becomes a cancer. And that's the problem, is that all of our cells in our body need to know when they're supposed to die and die at the right time in the right way. And when they don't, it's really bad for the rest of our body. So sunburns need to be prevented first. But if you get one, I think the key thing is get out of the sun. When you notice and you're out on the beach and you realize, I think I'm turning pink. First thing, get out of the sun. Second is take an anti-inflammatory like ibuprofen, right? It's not so much thermal injury to our skin that's occurring with a sunburn as it is that DNA injury that's occurring. And our skin recognizes that pretty fast, and that's what's generating this inflammatory response. So anyway, get out of the sun, take an anti-inflammatory because there's all this inflammation present in the skin at that point, and apply like cool cloths, right? Don't put ice directly on your skin. That's not advisable. But a cool cloth to the areas of the body to cool it down. It's going to be very warm, and it can reduce swelling and pain and the symptoms of the sunburn in a way if you didn't take an anti-inflammatory or didn't put a cold on it, it would take longer to heal. So that's my initial advice. And then sometimes we get a first-degree burn, which is just where the skin turns red and then eventually goes away. A second-degree burn is when you're getting blister formation, and those usually pop up in a matter of hours to days after the sunburn. And those we don't recommend that you rupture. Leave those blisters alone. Just cover them and try to protect them. But if it does rupture, which they often do, then treat it like the rug burn. Really, it's a superficial abrasion at that point, and it needs to be protected from infection. Keep it clean, keep it dry, keep it covered again. And so that's what you do. And of course, those secondary burns can become infected. And like I said earlier, if there's increasing redness, increasing pain, it's not just progressively getting better, then that's the time to see your doctor. And I would say that if you have a secondary burn that just covers a large portion of your body, right? Like if you're out there and your whole back, maybe your front and your legs and your arms and everything has a big bad burn on it, that would be a time to go see your doctor. You're probably going to get very dehydrated. And that's the other real risk with sunburns, is that they promote dehydration, because our skin, when it's healthy and normal, helps preserve our hydration status. And when it's injured, we lose water out of our body really rapidly, that we can't see or even know is happening until we're like, wow, I'm really thirsty, or I'm really lightheaded, or I pass out, and then we go to the hospital and you need IV fluids. So those are the times to see the doctor with a sunburn.
Can you go to a third-degree sunburn?
I suppose, but
I mean, what would be considered
but I don't think
a
I've ever
third-degree
seen
burn?
Third-degree burn is when you're all the way through the dermis into the subcutaneous tissue, into the fat tissue below our skin. And I don't think I've ever seen a sunburn ever progress to that level. I'm not saying it can't happen, but
I've had a bad
this is the
sunburn.
kind of burn. It takes a very high temperature, like you put your hand in a fire, or you touch the inside of an oven, or the leg on the muffler of a motorcycle. These common injuries where you're touching something that's incredibly hot that can burn all the way through the skin to those sub-skin structures, into even the muscle, into the nerves, into veins and arteries. It can get really messy with a third-degree burn, and that immediately requires emergency care.
So sunburns just surface level.
Yeah, these are sunburns are first and second degree burns.
So I don't think I realized the connection between dehydration and sunburns, but it's so true.
Yeah.
So do like lotions work, or is that just a superficial temporary relief versus drinking water?
Aloe vera really cools off my
yeah, aloe
skin.
vera is great, and it will hydrate the skin. But when you get a sunburn, you just need to aggressively drink fluids. Just sip on that water even more than you would otherwise. If you're in Cancun, you get a sunburn, the temptation is going to be, I'm thirsty, I'll have another margarita. Alcohol is also a driver for dehydration. So make sure that you're getting extra water, not just alcohol.
Well, that's a good
after
point. A lot of
sunburn.
people go to the lake, they go out to the pool, and they drink, they consume a lot of alcohol, and is that actually affecting you more and getting sunburned?
Yeah, I'm not certain that there's a connection between being dehydrated and then getting a sunburn. I would just say there's absolutely a connection between getting sunburned and getting dehydrated. And so it's a bad thing to be dehydrated already because of alcohol and then get a bad sunburn. It's a double whammy. That can land you in the hospital getting IV fluids. Sure.
And so what are the different SPFs? Because I heard a rumor that you can only go up so high in SPF, or it's the same.
It's like 50 or 20. I never know which one to buy. I just buy the highest number.
Yeah, there's the natural temptation, right, to just buy that SPF 100.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
It's the most powerful. It's supposed to protect you the most. I mean,
bigger is better,
yeah.
right? When you look at the literature on protection from the ultraviolet A and B radiation, you want to get a sunblock that is for both, right? So against UVA and B. That's really important. There are sunblocks out there that are just A, I think. So make sure it's for both, number one. Number two is that really anything above SPF 50 is not adding much protection, right? In theory, above that is a better block, but it's kind of more than necessary to prevent. More than the strength. So definitely go for above like 25 or 30, aim for the 40s, the 50s for really good protection. That's my advice to patients. But where we usually miss it is not in buying the right sunscreen. It's that we go out all day somewhere in the sun, we apply that sunscreen in the morning, and then we don't reapply a few hours later. And if you look at the bottle, they'll say apply after 1 hour, apply after 2 hours. Apply every hour. I mean, that's where people make the mistake. They think they're protected all day, and they're not. I really don't. You might, even if the bottle says apply every 4 hours, just ignore that and reapply at least every hour, certainly every 2, because it wears off. It just does.
Yeah, or I feel like I'll apply and then immediately get in the water, and it'll
it just washes it off. I feel like.
Yeah, I haven't seen the research to support the idea that you have to leave it on for like 10 or 15 minutes. I still do that even with my own kids because, again, I don't want them to get sunburned. But as far as I know, they don't need to be activated, right, by some certain amount of time. So I kind of just logically looking at it, imagine that it's probably effective the moment you put it on. But I think giving it 10 to 15 minutes to really soak in and find its spot, right, is a good idea.
It's parenting rules 101. I like that.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today. We spoke about, the different kind of burns: sunburn, rug burn, carpet burn. We talked about paper cuts.
Yep.
And I hope everyone learned a little bit of something.
I did. I've never heard sunscreen and sunburns described at a DNA level. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And these are such minor things that we can get every day that cause so much pain and agony. It's kind of silly, but it's not.
It's part of the human experience. I mean, if some alien life form showed up and said, tell us what it's like to be human, suffering would be one of those core elements of our humanity, right? And this is all part of that spectrum of the human condition. And paper cuts happen to rich people, poor people, all over the world. Burns happen. So there's this universality.
Ooh, that's a good word.
I'm not sure that's real, but there's a universalness to superficial injuries and self-inflicted injuries that I think help define what it means to be human.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Gabe.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, great time.
This has been Sounds Like Health. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us on Texas A&M Health Talk, a production of the Texas A&M University Health Science Center. Visit us on the web at vitalrecord.tamhsc.edu, where you'll find answers to all of your health questions. Until next time, stay healthy.